Hello everyone, Sahil here. Now we are going to listen to podcast news which includes important editorials. While walking in the morning or evening, while cooking, cycling or during free time you can listen. It will enhance your learning and understanding of various accents and pronunciations. Listening improves the quality of communication and comprehension. Before going ahead, I would like to welcome you all to the virtual school. A new way of learning and teaching, with the vision of Let's Grow Together. Our mission is to learn how to learn and teach how to teach. So stay tuned. And here we go. Editorial 1. Law and Lawmakers SC is right in saying legislative privilege cannot be a cover for crimes in the House. The Supreme Court ruling that legislative privilege cannot be extended to provide legal immunity to criminal acts committed by lawmakers ought to be welcomed for two reasons. It lays down that legislators charged with unruly behavior that results in offenses under penal laws cannot be protected either by their privilege or their free speech rights. Second, the decision revivifies the law relating to a prosecutor's role in withdrawing an ongoing criminal case. The LDF government in Kerala has suffered a setback as it strongly favored the withdrawal of cases against 6 members sought to be prosecuted for creating a ruckus in the Assembly on March 13, 2015, when they boisterously tried to interrupt the presentation of the budget presented by the erstwhile UDF regime. Their action resulted in destruction or damage to some items, amounting to a loss of 2.20 Indian rupees lakh. Based on the Assembly Secretary's complaint, the police registered a case and later filed a charge sheet against them for committing mischief and trespass under the IPC and destroying public property under the Prevention of Damage to Public Property Act, 1984. This year, the Chief Judicial Magistrate, Thiruvananthapuram, had rejected the application by the public prosecutor for withdrawal from prosecution, an order that was later affirmed by the Kerala HC. It is not surprising that the Apex Court concurred with these decisions, as it is indeed an unacceptable argument that the alleged vandalism took place as part of the legislators' right to protest on the floor of the House. Kerala CM Pinarayi Vijayan, who has rejected calls for asking his General Education Minister, V. Sivankudi, one of the accused, to resign and face trial, maintains that the matter ought to have been seen as a political protest and something that should not have been taken into the domain of criminal prosecution. He is indeed right when he says that courts ought not to reappraise a prosecutor's decision to withdraw a case, and that they should only examine whether the prosecutor had applied his mind independently. However, there is equal force in the proposition that it is the court's duty to decide whether the withdrawal is in good faith, is in the interest of public policy, and is not aimed at thwarting the process of law. Legislative privilege and parliamentary free speech are necessary elements of a lawmaker's freedom to function, but it is difficult to disagree with the court's conclusion that an alleged act of destroying public property within the House cannot be considered essential for their legislative functions. It is indeed quite legal for Mr. Sivankudi to remain in office, as he is yet to be convicted. However, he will be well advised to take a cue from several recent precedents of those in ministerial positions stepping down until their names are cleared by due process. Thank you. Editorial 2. Patchwork progress move to hasten insured bank deposits repayment need not have taken this long. The government hopes to ring in fresh changes to the 1961 Deposit Insurance and Credit Guarantee Corporation law in the monsoon session, after the cabinet nod this week. From Saver's perspective, the most significant modification on the anvil is a 90-day deadline for the corporation, DIC, to remit the insured deposits of customers in troubled banks. As per the plan, once the RBI imposes curbs on a bank, the clock will start ticking and by the 91st day or thereabouts, account holders will get their outstanding balance back with a cap of 5 Indian rupees lakh. While Finance Minister Nirmala Sitharaman said this will not apply retrospectively, she did indicate that this would apply to cases of lenders already under a moratorium. In the last 2 years, Yes Bank, Lakshmi Vilas Bank and the PMC Bank have faced such a bar on depositors seeking to withdraw. PMC Bank accounts still face such curbs, even as savings parked in other cooperative lenders that have gone under continue to elude their rightful owners. The minister said it normally takes 8 to 10 years for insured deposits to be forked out, from the time a bank hits a hurdle and myriad conditions are imposed on withdrawals. But these delays were well known last year too, when the insured deposit amount was raised to 5 Indian rupees lakh from 1 Indian rupee lakh laid down in 1993. Making incremental changes in quick succession suggests a piecemeal approach to governance rather than a system-wide view, even though the government stressed it has been working overtime to resolve the PMC bank crisis. Nevertheless, given the rising distress in households and the downward momentum in savings levels due to the pandemic, this change must be allowed to make it through the din in Parliament. As per RBI data, 76.21 Indian rupees lakh crore, or almost 51% of deposits are now insured, but 98.3% of all accounts have balances of 5 Indian rupees lakh or less, so they are fully insured. This can be a source of renewed comfort for people in the banking system, grappling with bad loans, dwindling deposits and a still fledgling insolvency framework. It is important for financial stability that people feel it is safer to park their money in a bank than stashing it under a mattress. For several people with limited financial literacy and access to retirement savings instruments, with lifetime earnings, possibly over 5 Indian rupees lakh, parked in a neighborhood cooperative bank, this would still be a less than perfect outcome. The RBI needs to up its oversight game, and the Centre, which has recently made the Department of Cooperation a full-scale ministry, needs to allow it to do so. Moreover, just as the latest amendments have an enabling provision to raise the premium paid by banks to the DIC in future, there should have been one to raise the insured deposit limit in line with inflation and per capita income trends. Thank you. Editorial 3. Visualizing the Himalaya with other coordinates, looking at it only through the prism of geopolitics and security concerns, ignores its other crucial frameworks. Swathasida Sarkar. Getty Images over Snap/Getty Images. A conceptual audit of questions related to geopolitics and security concerns while talking or thinking about the Himalaya is perhaps long overdue. There is no gainsaying the truth that we have been examining the Himalaya mainly through the coordinates of geopolitics and security while relegating others as either irrelevant or incompatible. In a certain sense, our intellectual concerns over the Himalaya have been largely shaped by the assumption of fear, suspicion, rivalry, invasion, encroachment, and pugnacity. If during colonial times it was Russophobia, then now it is Sinophobia or Pakistanphobia that in fact determines our concerns over the Himalaya. Within the domain of geopolitics and security, conceived by that which lies outside the Himalaya, a process that decolonial scholars such as Pauline Hountondji refers to as extraversion. Ironically, it is the Delhi-Beijing-Islamabad triad, and not the mountain per se, that defines our concerns about the Himalaya. Are we not really leading Himalayan studies towards the dead end of violent intellectual pursuits? A national Himalaya. If extraversion in the field of knowledge production has resulted in academic dependency, in the case of Himalayan studies it has given birth to the political compulsion of territorializing the Himalaya on a par with the imperatives of nationalism. Thus the attempt to create a national Himalaya by each of the 5 nations, Nepal, Bhutan, India, Pakistan, and Tibet/China, that fall within this transnational landmass called the Himalaya. The National Mission on Himalayan Studies, for example, under the Ministry of Environment, Forest, and Climate Change, Government of India, is a classic case in point that provides funds for research and technological innovations, but creating policies only for the Indian Himalayan region, IHR. The mission document avowedly claims, the Government of India has come up with this mission in recognition of the fact that the Himalayan ecosystem is important for ecological security of India, https://bit.ly/3x8domb. Thus, comes the Indian Himalaya. It reminds us of that ancient parable where a few blind men were trying to fathom how huge an elephant was by touching only the different parts of its body. By considering cartographic fixations as the natural limit of scholarship, we have overburdened Himalayan studies with the concerns of states in place of people, culture, market, or ecology. India's understanding of the Himalaya is informed by a certain kind of realism, as the Himalaya continues to remain as a space largely defined in terms of sovereign territoriality, in contrast to alternative imaginations such as community, ecology, or market. It may be perceived that such an alternative conceptualization of Himalaya is not only possible but also necessary. But can we really work out such an alternative imagination, especially when we find territorialization and securitization to be the 2 dominant modes through which the Himalaya is imagined both in the official context, and, by extension, in popular discourses? A historical logjam. The Himalayas' territorialization bears a colonial legacy which also sets up its post-colonial destiny as played out within the dynamics of nation-states. The arbitration of relationships between and among the 5 nation-states falling within the Himalayan landmass has failed to transcend the approach derived from the given categories of territoriality, sovereignty, and difference. As such, the fact that the lines of peoplehood and the national border, especially within the context of the Himalaya, never coincided, is bound to give birth to tensions while working out projects predicated upon national sovereignty. Given this historical logjam, what we can only expect is the escalation of territorial disputes as the immediate fallout when infrastructure development projects in the border areas are adopted by constituting nation-states to secure their respective territories falling within the Himalayan landmass. Borders and their differences. It needs to be recognized that political borders and cultural borders are not the same thing. Political borders are to be considered as space-making strategies of modern nation-states that do not necessarily coincide with cultural borders. In other words, while a statist imagination has a telling effect on the way a border is understood in political terms, culture in that sense defies the political idea of border or at best considers it as permeable, penetrable, connective, heterogeneous, and one that can be accounted for mainly through dreams, passions, flows and livelihoods. The singular statist conception of a political border would then appear to become apolissemic or even rhizomatic when viewed in cultural terms, and, by extension, in terms of trade and ecology or the environment. It needs to be realized that human security cannot be effectively appreciated through the paradigm of sovereign territoriality, although state systems operating within the Himalaya have failed to devise any other framework to grapple with the issue of security. More often than not, the state has dominated the agenda of defining the domain of non-traditional security, such as human rights, cases of ecological devastation, climate change, human trafficking, migration, forced exodus of people, transnational crime, resource scarcity, and even pandemics, besides setting the tone of an approach to handling traditional security threats, such as military, political, and diplomatic conflicts that were considered as threats against the essential values of the state, territorial integrity, and political sovereignty. Interestingly enough, it has often appeared as a fact that the measures to deal with traditional security threats from outside have in fact triggered non-traditional insecurities on several fronts on the inside. Understanding the Himalaya. Keeping these arguments in order, it is proposed that there could be several alternate ways of reading the geopolitical and the security concerns of the Himalaya, and if the statist meaning, territoriality, sovereignty, and difference, is privileged over and above those of the anthropological, historical, cultural, and ecological ones, it would continue to reflect a set of mental processes predicated on a certain conception of spatial imagination that could be anything but un-Himalayan or, for that matter, antithetical to the very idea of the Himalaya itself. How long should one go on referring to the Himalaya as the one of the largest biodiversity hotspots? Or as the largest water tower of Asia? Or as a zone that is culturally and linguistically diverse, sharing a common historical pool of resources, communities, cultures, civilizations, and memories, and susceptible to climate change and ecological vulnerabilities? When would these terms of references be predicated in our scholarly, and, by extension, pedestrian, attempts to understand the Himalaya and produce impactful policy research on the Himalaya? The argument is simple. The Himalaya being a naturally evolved phenomenon should be understood through frameworks that have grown from within the Himalaya. The Himalaya needs to be visualized with an open eye and taken in as a whole instead of in parts, unlike the ancient parable of the efforts of the blind men in trying to understand the elephant in parts. The Himalaya is a space whose history defines its geography rather than the other way round. Since histories are always made rather than given, we need to be careful about what kind of Himalayan history we are trying to inject or project in the way we imagine the Himalaya. Viewing the Himalaya as a space of political power and, by extension, through the coordinates of nation-states epitomizing differential national histories is a violent choice, which actually enriched ultra-sensitivity towards territorial claims and border management. A roadmap of other routes. In contrast to this, if we are ready to consider the Himalaya as a space that is deeply embedded in human subjectivities, we can possibly come out of the grip of a national absolute space, which is actually necessary if we are to address the concerns of trade, commerce, community, ecology, and environment issues which are no less important when we are to think of securing livelihoods, cultures and the environment in the Himalaya. In fact, the roadmap of all these alternative routes trade, community, environment are located beyond the absolutist statist position. The need is that these alternative imaginations of security should be given the required space in the way policy making, state-building strategies and diplomatic relations are worked out in relation to the Himalaya. The time has come when we need to take position between the Himalaya as a national space and as a space of dwelling instead of avoiding our encounter with this ambivalence. Swathasida Sarkar is Professor and Director, Center for Himalayan Studies, University of North Bengal, Darjeeling, West Bengal. Thank you. Editorial 4. A Hindu-Muslim dialogue without conditions. A genuine dialogue the RSS chief hopes to initiate must also recognize that India belongs equally to all communities in it. A. Fazur Rahman. Getty Images/I stock photo. In what has been widely perceived as a gesture of conciliation towards Muslims, the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, RSS, Chief Mohan Bhagwat said in a recent speech, https://bit.ly/3j20e6t, that Hindus lynching minorities for cow slaughter were acting against Hindutva, and those asserting that Muslims have no place in India were not Hindus. He also tried to allay Muslim fears about the bleak future of Islam in India, saying the religion was not in danger, and asked Muslims to help the RSS in making the country a world leader, Vishwaguru, on the basis of the fact that all Indians, being the descendants of common ancestors from the last 40,000 years, have the same DNA. The viewpoints. Muslim opinion makers either brushed off Mr. Bhagwat's remarks as mere rhetoric because RSS leaders often spoke with a forked tongue, or tried to mollify him by saying that if there is someone who can initiate perestroika in the RSS, it is Bhagwat because, in a gradual manner he has been trying to change the Sangh's attitude towards Muslims. If the untenability of the first viewpoint is based on a dismissive distrust of the RSS, the second amounts to nothing more than complacent backslapping. Such facile responses, to say the least, exude an attitude that is not conducive to a genuine Hindu-Muslim dialogue the RSS chief hopes to initiate. To his credit, the RSS chief spoke with an open mind and wanted the mistrust, avishwas, between Hindus and Muslims to be understood and dispelled in an atmosphere of forthright outspokenness, kuri kuri bait ko jaisa highways samajana. However, communal unity, ekta, through such a dialogue was possible only if Muslims acknowledge India as their motherland, accept its traditions and culture, parampara, sanskriti, and honor their common ancestors, saman purva. Mr. Bhagwat virtually rendered these three prerequisites a sine qua non for establishing one's Indianness with the condescending summation, Biki Hamar Yahan Sab Swatan Trada Hai, there is freedom for everything else in our land. A melding. This attempt to meld Indianness and Hinduness together is eerily similar to V.D. Savarkar's credo, which defines a Hindu as one who regards the entire subcontinent as his fatherland, Pitrabhu, descended of Hindu parents, and considers this land holy, Punyabhu. For Savarkar these three conditions signified a common nation, Rashtra, a common race, Jati, and a common culture, Sanskriti, respectively, and together they form the foundation on which Hindutva rests. Several assertions of Mr. Bhagwat reflected this attitude. For instance, his full statement on cow vigilantism was Hindustan Hindu Rashtra Hai, Gamatapujya Hai, Lekin lynching Karnwalya Hindutva ke khilaf jarahi hain, India is a Hindu nation, the cow is worthy of worship, but the lynchers are going against Hindutva. He also quoted the RSS founder K.B. Hedgewar as stating that Hindus were wrong in blaming the British and the Muslims for their pitiable state, Durwasta, because, despite being the owners, Malik, of their country, and their large numbers, if Hindus could be reduced to such a state then there must be some shortcoming, kami, in them that needs to be addressed. This, Mr. Bhagwat said, is how the RSS conceptualizes the situation, and therefore, in its view the minorities are not the reason for the miserable condition of the Hindus in a Hindu country, Hindu own K-main. Portraiture of India. Had the Muslim commentators listened to Mr. Bhagwat's 34-minute speech made in Ghaziabad instead of relying on selective versions of it publicized by the media, they would perhaps have challenged, in the spirit of the candidness he suggested, the portraiture of India as indigenously Hindu with a non-native Muslim population. Nonetheless, was Mr. Bhagvat trying to say that Muslims, even if they are our own brethren, Hamar apni bhai, now, are outsiders? But he did want the people to know that Islam's entry into India was aggressive, wo akramakan se sathaya, but even so, all those who came to our land are still here coexisting peacefully, Hamar yahan jojo ayahai wo aajb maujud hai. Islam in the subcontinent. Mr. Bhagvat should have known that Islam in the subcontinent predates the forays of invaders such as Mahmud of Ghazni, Muhammad Ghori, and Muhammad bin Qasim who captured Sindh and Multan from Rajadhir around 711 CE. It was around 630 CE that Islamist Arab merchants started arriving in the coastal regions of Konkan, Gujarat and Malabar in continuation of the trade links they had with India from pre-Islamic times. The cordiality of this transactive relationship was such that it resulted in the spread of Islamic culture and religion in India. Thus, most Indian Muslims today are the descendants of the locals who converted to Islam and, therefore, they have always considered India their motherland and respected its traditions, culture, and diversity. The ultimate proof of this patriotism was demonstrated when they chose India over Pakistan after partition. But it would be unfair to expect this loyalism to be rooted in the subliminal recognition of an autochthonous Indian race that magnanimously accommodated them. For there is no evidence to show that such a race existed in India, nor are the Muslims aliens. Researcher Tony Joseph, in his engrossing book Early Indians, The Story of Our Ancestors and Where We Came From and subsequent articles, has shown that Indians are a multi-source civilization who draw their cultural impulses, traditions, and practices from a variety of heredities and migration histories. He calls the earliest direct ancestors of people living in India today, the first Indians. They were the descendants of the out of Africa, OOA, migrants who arrived here about 65,000 years ago. The first Indians were later joined by Zagrasian herders from Iran with whom they formed the Harappan civilization. After 2000 BCE came the Aryans, the Austro-Asiatic and Tibeto-Burman language speakers, and, much later, the Greeks, the Jews, the Huns, the Sakas, the Parsis, the Syrians, the Mughals, the Portuguese, the British, the Siddhis, all of whom left small marks all over the subcontinent. In short, says Mr. Joseph, almost all the population groups of India carry 50 to 65% of their ancestry from the first Indians, no matter where in the caste hierarchy they stand, what language they speak, which region they inhabit or what religion they belong to. This being the truth, India cannot be spoken of in terms of Hinduon Kadesh, Hindu country, or Musalmanan Kadesh, Muslim country. It belongs equally to all communities living here, and as pointed out by the RSS chief himself, India being a democracy cannot countenance the dominance of Hindus or Muslims. Likewise, any Hindu-Muslim dialogue must be unconditional and take place in an atmosphere of peace and harmony. In Mr. Bhagvat's own words, Dark mar ekta hona na hin hai, let there not be unity out of fear. A. Fazur Rahman is the Secretary General of the Islamic Forum for the Promotion of Moderate Thought. Email, themoderates2020@gmail.com. Thank you. Editorial 5. Lights dim for roving troops. COVID-19 has hit Assam's itinerant theatre groups hard, forcing several artists to find other forms of livelihood. Rahul Karmakar reports on how Baitramayoman groups, which are a distinct feature of the culture of the state, are on the verge of closure. Workers clean a theatre hall which has been closed since the COVID-19 outbreak, in Guwahati. Below, workers ready the theatre at Bhagyadevi Theatre in Marwa, Nulbari district of Assam. Ritu Raj Kanwar. Many men in Manikpur spend 7-9 months of an Assamese year on the road. A large village in Assam's Bongaigang district, about 185 kilometers west of Guwahati, Manikpur has for decades been the setting source of several Baitramayoman groups. The Assamese year of 365 days starts mid-April of a Gregorian calendar. Baitramayoman translates into mobile theatre and setting entails a range of activities from putting up tents to decorating the stage. A traveling theatre group of an average of 150 persons has 55 to 60 stage workers engaged in settings. About 5 months ago, more than 30 stage workers boarded a bus in Manikpur. This would have been routine had the bus not been sent by a Kerala-based firm that offered them jobs, says Abhijit Bhattacharya, a playwright associated with mobile theatres for 22 years. About one-fourth of some 4,000 stage workers and technicians employed directly by at least 30 Bhattacharya have left Assam for jobs or in search of greener pastures after the first COVID-19 wave eased by October 2020. Most of those who stayed back, primarily because of age and because they had not picked up any other skill, have been struggling to sustain their families. Gunajit Das, who played multiple musical instruments for 30 years, has switched to vending fish on a bicycle after selling vegetables that did not earn him enough for his family of 5. Fellow musician Prabhat Roy, who spent 35 years with mobile theatre groups, has become a jogalai, helper, to a mason. Pratap Burrow, who played the violin, mandolin, and flute for 32 years, has opened a small pan shop. Stage craftsman Lahit Pathak earns whenever people need his service for cutting or filling up earth. The situation is similar for theatre troupe cooks Dharma Roy and Dilip Das. Setting specialist Remsing Taran wields an axe to sell firewood. All of them are from districts across Assam, Bajala, Baksa, Barpeta, and Nulbari. The more resourceful have managed to stay afloat. Music director Jatin Pathak of Manikpur turned his attention to his agricultural land to become an organic farmer. He commands a good price for his produce. Many of us never thought beyond theatre. The lockdown taught me to have a backup plan, he says. Popular actor and playwright Champak Sarma opened a restaurant in Guwahati's Gorshuk. The new business has not been profitable with the restrictions in place, but I hope to see better days for the restaurant as well as for mobile theatre, he says. 2 of his plays, Danab, Demon, for the Itihash Theatre Group and Draupadar Bastra Haran, Draupadi's Disrobing, for the Kohanur Theatre Group, were among the last to be staged before the 2019-2020 mobile theatre season ended prematurely in March 2020 because of the COVID-19 pandemic. Struck by a virus. Putsala, about 80 kilometers east of Bongai Gangv, is perhaps the only town that prospered post-lockdown in 2020. In August that year, it became the headquarters of Bajala, Assam's 34th district carved out of Barpeta. Prior to the administrative upgrade, Putsala was known primarily as the hub of Assam's mobile theatre. It was here that Achyut Lagar, a pioneering dramatist, actor, director, and producer, founded the Natraj Theatre, the first of the Bhattacharya in 1963. He was inspired by the Jatra, a popular folk theatre form of Bengal, but tailored his theatrical presentations to local specifications and tastes besides adopting a unique business model. He let a local committee in Putsala publicize his plays, organize the shows and take a share of the profit in return. All the 132 mobile theatre groups, at least 32 of them remain, born after Natraj, have followed this cooperative business model based on informal agreements. Natraj Theatre folded up after the death of Achyut Lagar, revered as the father of the Bhattacharya, in 2016. A stone's throw from Achyut Lagar's house is the complex that his relative Ratan Lagar constructed in Jyotinagar, a locality in Putsala near the landmark Badadev University. Ratan Lagar, who died in 2017, founded the Kohanur Theatre in 1976 after several groups tried to do a Natraj only to fade away. Kohanur's co-founder Krishna Roy broke away to form the Abahan Theatre in 1978 but sold it to popular Assamese cinema and theatre actor Prastuti Parashar a few years ago. Kohanur brought in the element of special effects with Mahabharat, a costume drama that took the audience by storm in 1984 with cinematic fight sequences. It shot to international fame by adapting Titanic in 1998, using indigenous special effects to turn and sink the ill-fated luxury ship on stage. In 2010, Kohanur became the first Assamese mobile theatre group to stage 3 plays at the Indira Gandhi National Centre for the Arts at the invitation of the National School of Drama in New Delhi. Apart from plays, the troupe presented special effects scenes in the Titanic and Dinosaur, a play based on Steven Spielberg's Jurassic Park. Kohanur soared as the Titanic sank in more than 200 shows during the 1998-99 season. The Bhattacharya season starts mid-July. 2 months go into readying 3 plays and rehearsing with the actors, dancers, and musicians. The shows start around Vishvakarma Puja, mostly September 17th, and end on the eve of Bohag or Rongali Bihu, usually April 13th. Each troupe sets up its temporary stage and hall for 3 nights each at 75 to 80 places, ending a season without breaks even if there are natural calamities or political disturbances, with 210 to 235 shows. Mobile theaters have withstood many a challenge. Often, our theatrical adaptations became more popular than the films they were adapted from. The traveling theaters thrived as the Assamese film industry suffered. We held our own against all other forms of entertainment, cinema, television, and even digital. But an invisible virus has deflated us, says Tupan Lagar, who took over charge of Kohinoor from his father. Kohinoor lost about 15 Indian rupees lakh when shows were cancelled for 12 days during the violence that erupted against the Citizenship Amendment Act in December 2019. Most Baitramiomans thought it was a temporary setback like the 2-month hiatus in 1983 at the peak of the anti-foreigner Assam agitation. The mobile theaters overcame the outlawed United Liberation Front of Assam's threat in 2007 to stop them from destroying Assamese culture with Bollywood-inspired stories and the counterinsurgency operations in the 1990s when security forces discouraged people from venturing out at night. The mobile theaters have traditionally been staged at night with the last show at 5 a.m. Mapping the route. Representatives of the All Assam Mobile Theatre Producers Association headed by Bordeaux Asila Theatre owner Nazrul Islam met Chief Minister Himanta Biswa Sarma over a fortnight ago for restarting the show to bail out of poverty hundreds of people associated with the industry. The association has so far recognized 22 theatre groups, the criteria for membership being at least 2 consecutive years of sustainable operation. There are about 10 non-member groups that have a small budget and operate mostly in villages within a district or two, unlike the big budget groups that perform across Assam and beyond. If we can start the 2021-22 season in October even with 500 to 600 viewers compared to the normal 1,500 to 2,000, we may be able to stay afloat. The government said it will ramp up the vaccination drive. This will facilitate a sizable audience for the mobile theaters. If the situation does not improve, it could be very tough for theatre groups to be revived later, Tupan Lagar says. The glimmer of hope has made the likes of Lankeshwar Barman, the manager of Kohinoor Theatre, fish out the seasonal travel map. Our travel route is planned around where our group will perform on Shasthya, 6th day of the 10-day Durga Puja, usually in October. Our performance calendar is fixed as and when we ink an agreement with a local organizing committee. Experience is needed to juggle with the dates of more than 70 organizing committees every season and plan the route so that we don't end up traveling 100 to 150 kilometers in different directions, he says. Each travel theater has 2 sets of skeletons, bamboos, wooden planks, iron frames, etc. of a 130 x 90 feet temporary hall inclusive of a 2-in-1 stage. The route is planned in such a way that the stage workers travel the least on the night of the third and final day of the shows from place A to set up the theater in place B in time for the first show there. The last stop of a group is invariably a place 15 to 20 kilometers from its base. Important for the rural economy. The survival of the mobile theaters is crucial not only for the groups but also the rural economy, says Suresh Ranjan Gotuka, a mass communication design researcher at the Indian Institute of Technology Guwahati. He had done a project on the Baitramiyoman-driven economy more than a decade ago. Mobile theaters work on 2 payment systems, a 9-month contract and lump sum. In the first category are the star actors mostly from cinema and TV and the general character actors, dancers, members of the orchestra, sound arrangers, background voice artists, makeup artists, costume designers, tent and stage workers, lighting technicians, set designers, transporters, managers and up to 8 cooks for the entire traveling team. On lump sum pay are the directors, choreographers, music directors, art directors, playwrights, and lyricists, he says. There are also graphic designers and printers, who have been deprived of their assured seasonal income from the theatre group since the 2020 lockdown. Before the pandemic, the annual turnover of the Baitramiomans averaged 25 Indian rupees crore, with the major groups investing about 2 Indian rupees crore. Some attracted corporate sponsorship. More importantly, Baitramiomans stimulate various indirect economic activities by contributing to the local economy with seasonal employment and community contribution. Numerous namgars, Vaishnav prayer halls, libraries, voluntary associations, and schools have been built all across Assam and mostly in rural and semi-urban areas as a result of the profit sharing between the theatre troupes and the host committees, Gotuka says. A local committee negotiates the deal with the theatre group ahead of the season and pays an advance ranging from 50,000 Indian rupees to 1 Indian rupee and 50 cents lakh. The advance is adjusted with a fixed amount per first show per night to be paid to a theatre group. The organizing committee takes 30%-40% of the money collected from the second show and gives the rest to a group. The collection from the third show, in the case of smash hit plays, is shared 50:50. Whether or not a committee profits from the first show, it has to pay us the fixed amount according to that agreement. Besides, a committee takes care of the accommodation of the troupe members, provides a kitchen and firewood. We spend on transportation and food, says Subodh Majumdar, producer of Theatre Bhagyadevi based in Nulbari district Smorawa. Founded by his father Sharad Majumdar in 1976, this group had made a passenger aircraft take off in the play Hijack, based on the 1999 hijacking of an Indian Airlines flight in Kandahar, Afghanistan. The Way Forward. Kulpajit Hazarika, producer of the Horhat-based Hangal Theatre, believes staging a comeback would be an uphill task. One reason is the damage of acoustic and other equipment and tent and stage materials because of non-use over a long period of time. Starting afresh needs an investment of 40 to 45 Indian rupees lakh, and we are not sure of recovering the cost because of the prevailing uncertainty. More importantly, the issue is to get experienced technicians, many of whom have gone out for jobs, he says. Synchronizing a play on a double stage is a special skill set not many can handle. The scenes move from one stage to the other like a fast change of frame in a film. Some groups have taken strength from Jitashri Theatre, a small budget group based in Marijayan. Jitashri was the only group to stage some plays adhering to guidelines such as physical distancing and providing hand sanitizers to the viewers for a few months before the second COVID-19 wave struck. The emotional attachment with and popularity of Bhai Tremayoman should see us through a difficult phase. But it will be easier for smaller groups with a minimal budget to rebound compared to the major groups which have more to lose because of the volume of investment, Abahans Parashar says. Bajyadavi's Majumdar is apprehensive of how the audience will react after the gap. We are not sure how the country's economy has impacted them, whether they can afford spending on a non-essential mode of entertainment and whether the younger generations will get over their addiction to their smartphones, he says. He has already begun thinking in terms of leaving the theatre business if the age of social distancing does not give way to social gathering that the Bhai Tremyomans depend on. I sold off 3 trucks and have started undertaking local contractual assignments to fall back upon, he says. Jiten Das, a dancer choreographer for 18 years, has joined him as an employee for contractual jobs. This is better than going out with a spade and shovel in search of work back home in Poritopa Thudakata village, Nulbari district, he says. According to Tupan Lagar, the mobile theatres began feeling the pinch with producers competing to add glamour to their plays. It began with Assamese film star Jatin Bora in 2005-06, who ended up earning 6-7 times more from the theatre than from movies. The budgets subsequently became bigger as producers broke a tradition by bringing film effects specialists from elsewhere to execute plays that turned Bora into a dwarf or a fat blob on stage. The ownupmanship saw another actor, Mridul Chudiya, playing triple roles, a dwarf, a person of normal height and an abnormally tall man, for another group. Quality suffered as producers relied more on gimmicks, masala, glamour, and double entendre, he says. Bhattacharya says there are very few playwrights who can maintain both quality and quantity, who can race against time, and gauge the capabilities of the actors. We go from historical and mythological to contemporary and social issues after interacting with the actors a producer ropes in. I have ended up writing 20 to 25 scripts in a season, he says. The last of his plays were the historical Joymatai for Abahan Theatre, the mythological Sakantala for Surajya Theatre, social dramas Madhubala for Abahan and Sonar Karunalaj Mok for Itihash Theatre. Bhattacharya says nobody could have envisaged the pandemic. But the Bhai Tremyomans became complacent about their popularity, never bothering to set up institutes to train people in a range of theatrical skills. I have been insisting on a mobile theater policy like we have a film policy, although the government did try to come up with one in 2013. We also need an archive to preserve everything about this cultural tradition for generations to come, he says. Mobile theaters do not have the industrial tag and are hence not included in government support schemes. They want to avoid complications in taxation, but a formal structure could have made them eligible for insurance. Their economy is solely based on the number of people in the audience, which is why the COVID-19 restrictions have damaged them like never before, Gotuka says. Theater producers are not sure how a new experiment by Guwahati-based Nexter Studios to stream their plays on digital platforms would pan out. We are paying the artists for recreating plays to be released online via an app. Our fingers are crossed, the studio's Ashim Nath says. But there cannot be any replacement of the real thing, says Najan Deka, secretary of Nulbari's Hari Mandir Committee. One of the largest theater organizers, this committee hosts as many groups on its 9 fields, especially during the October-November Raz Festival and Durga Puja. Mobile theater is an inseparable part of our cultural heritage. Many livelihoods are associated with it and organizing committees benefit from them. The public facilities we have, including schools, have come up from the money from mobile theaters. Yes, we lose some when the shows do not click. But the profits for the society at large far outweigh the losses to not want them back as soon as possible, he says. Thank you. Faith. He enables worship. Thirumular in his Thirumantiram likens Lord Shiva to clouds in the sky. He sees the relationship between himself and Lord Shiva as that between a calf and its mother. He calls out to Lord Shiva, who is known as Nandi, for who else can impart Jnana to him? Lord Shiva showers his blessings on those who inhabit the earth. He also lives among the celestials. He draws everyone like a magnet. He is fond of music, and Thirumular acknowledges that he sings Shiva's praises only because of the grace of the Lord. It is Lord Shiva who makes it possible for anyone to worship him, said R. Narayanan in a discourse. Mainakavakagar expresses a similar sentiment in his Thiruvakagam, when he says that he came to worship at the feet of Lord Shiva entirely due to the mercy of the Lord. The Lord is the enabler, but for whose love, none would be able to approach him. In his Kolarapadhagam, Nanan Sambandar, speaking of Shiva playing the veena, says that his fingers gently glide over the strings of the veena, Veena Thetavi. He is the head of the celestials. None can fathom his greatness. Yet, we worship him in whatever way possible. Since ancient times, people have understood God in different ways. But none has understood him fully. Many have sung verses praising God, but they have not comprehended his greatness completely. Sivakochariyar was a well-read sage. But even his bhakti was not equal to that of Ken Apanayanar. The latter had no instruction in the Vedas or other scriptures. But in terms of devotion, Ken Apanayanar was unparalleled, for he was willing to give both his eyes to Lord Shiva, when he saw the linga's eyes bleeding. Nothing can surpass the fragrance of the kasturi. Likewise, nothing can equal the true path shown by Lord Shiva, says Thirumular. Thank you. Thank you so much for watching this video as a podcast. Do like, share and comment. Press the subscribe button and hit the bell icon to get new notifications. Thank you. Take care and stay safe. God bless you all. Jai Ma Bharti. To download news and editorials in mp3, follow us on Telegram, Virtual School Official. The link is provided in the description below.